Hi everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the Insider Dev Tour so far. Yeah, woo! Okay, so my name is Killian McCoy. I'm a program manager at Microsoft, focused on bringing extensions to the new Edge browser. So for the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about developing with the new Edge browser. So last December, we shared that the next major version of Edge will be backed off of Chromium. And we also shared our intentions to not only adopt Chromium, but to also become a significant contributor to the project in a way that will not only make Edge better on Windows and other devices, but all Chromium-based browsers and frameworks as well. But before we get into those details, I want to take a step back and talk about why we're doing that. We spent much of last year listening to different audiences: developers, consumers, enterprises, educators, and user studies and focus groups, partner conversations, standards bodies, and at events around the world just like this. In this talk, we're going to focus on what listening taught us about web developers like you. So what did you tell us? The first thing we heard is that you still see inconsistent web capabilities across browsers, and this increases your test and development costs. What this usually means is that you're often coding your site in one browser, you go to test in others, and then find that a capability you needed isn't consistently supported in all browsers. This forces you to decide whether to re-implement a feature in two different ways or to just scrap using that new technology entirely. And web browsers spend a significant amount of time trying to close these capability gaps. In fact, when you consider that the web is composed of 35 trillion unique URLs, even a small gap in capabilities can have a large impact on your customers. By adopting and contributing to the Chromium open source project, we want to make sure that you're able to rely on a more consistent set of web capabilities across more browsers, and your users don't encounter compatibility issues in Edge. You can see Internet Explorer's compatibility journey in dark blue on this graph, as well as the current version of Edge in light blue. And the next version of Edge is represented by the top green line for all of these Chromium-based browsers. Here you can see the compatibility scores out of 551, and how our move to Chromium allows Edge to embrace a new set of improvements and opportunities in order to make the web better for everyone. Another issue you tell us is how fragmentation across browser versions and operating systems increases your test and development costs. You may have encountered fragmentation across operating systems. Edge is currently only supported on Windows 10, and if you develop on Mac, this means it's very difficult for you to test Edge. Either you need to install a VM, keep a separate computer for Edge, or rely on testing in production for your users, which isn't giving them the best experience. A year and a half ago, we made Edge available on iOS and Android. And now we're making sure that the next major version of Edge is supported across more platforms that you use. Now you can continue to develop on your platform of choice, and we'll make it much easier for you to test and develop on Edge. And as of May 20th, we've also released the Canary channel of the preview of the next Edge browser. So if you want to go ahead and test that out on Mac, you're able to do so. But we'll jump into that in a little bit. Another issue you told us is that you want new capabilities available at the speed of the web so that you can maximize code reuse. Today, we ship major updates to Edge approximately every 6 months as part of the next major OS update, and servicing every month or so on Patch Tuesday. This is a slower cadence than most other browsers, which ship major features as early as every 6 weeks. You've also told us that you want to be able to test the latest stable version of the browser so that you know what your customers are seeing, but you also want to try out a preview version to see what compatibility issues may have been introduced, or you might want to start experimenting with new web capabilities. We ship a preview version of Edge in the Windows Insider preview, but it forces you to choose whether you want to stay on the stable OS or try out the preview OS, and so it's not easy to test both stable and preview Edge side by side. The next major version of Edge will ship at a much faster cadence, and you will be able to install side by side up to 4 different channels of Edge on any supported operating system. We released the Canary channel last month. This channel is released daily and is used by the Edge engineering team to validate bug fixes and test new features. And as of today, you can install Canary on both Windows 10 and iOS. This is truly bleeding edge, so you may discover bugs before you have a chance to fix them. We also released the dev channel last month, which is updated weekly. We essentially pick the best build of Canary of the previous week and then support it and dev of the next week. We haven't yet released the beta or stable channels, but the beta channel will reflect a significantly more stable release, and it will be a good target for enterprises and IT pros to start piloting the next version of Edge. We expect the beta and stable channels to keep a 6-week update cycle, which is much faster than our current 6-month cadence, and this will match the release cycles of other major browsers. Fun arrows. Okay, the browser is just one of the apps, probably the most used one, that uses the web platform. However, there are over 2 million applications on Windows that use web content in some form. As we talked to developers, we heard that you want flexibility of using web and native code, but you also want the option to create cross-platform experiences by only using standards-based web technologies. We started our web applications journey on Windows 10 with Windows Web Applications. Over the years, we evolved it to support what we called hosted web apps and progressive web apps. These apps access native capabilities using WinRT APIs, or Windows Runtime APIs. They run in Windows Web Application Host, and they are acquired from the Microsoft Store and not from the browser. Using WinRT APIs meant that these apps could not be truly cross-platform because they relied on the capabilities of a specific platform. And because they were running in the Windows Web Application Host, this meant that they couldn't share context and other functionality between the browser and the host. And finally, your apps had limited discoverability because you could only discover them through the Microsoft Store and not through the browser. So we are excited to say that progressive web applications will be using web standards instead of WinRT APIs. They will be running in a browser-based host so that they will share functionality between the browser and the host. And now you can discover these experiences through both the store and the browser. There's a lot of clicking. All right, so now we're going to go into a demo of what progressive web apps will look like in the new Edge. And I won't dive too deeply because you might have already seen more, or you might see more later about progressive web applications. So here I've navigated to app.starbucks.com. Starbucks was actually a partner who committed to making great experiences for their customers on Edge, and we widely featured their innovations on the Microsoft 365 platform at Build 2019. And we're going to use their web app as an example to demonstrate a preview of the progressive web app experience in the new Edge. So as we're on their web page, we can see that this looks like a normal web app, but at the top right-hand corner of the browser, I almost did it. We can see, I tried to use the Zoom It tool, but we can see that we have an extra icon, which will allow us to install our PWA directly from the browser. So we're going to go ahead and install this Starbucks application. Once we do this, we notice that it pops out of the browser and into its own window. If we go ahead and click the ellipses at the top of our PWA, we can see that the PWA carried the context from the browser, and that my instance of LastPass is also opened inside this PWA. If I was logged in on LastPass in the browser, I would also be logged in here as well. And so not only does this share context, but it shares cookies. So if I right-click on the PWA and inspect, I can see that the browser and this host shares the same set of developer tools. So this is different than the old Edge, and we're happy to bring this to the new Edge. And just looking at the Starbucks app aesthetically, we can see that it looks like a native app should. And if we look at the bottom taskbar of the screen, we can see that the icon is the same size and what we'd expect based on what's present in the app manifest. And as a recap, a progressive web app is different from a website in that it has 3 things at a minimum. It uses a secure connection through HTTPS. It has an app manifest to know how to display itself on different platforms. And it also has a service worker to handle offline capabilities. So now that we've also looked at this application, let's go ahead and see how we can jump back into the browser from this context. If we reopen these ellipses at the top of our application, we can reopen it within Microsoft Edge. And if we want to see the other progressive web apps we have installed within the Edge browser, we can go to the menu at the top right-hand corner, look at our apps and how we manage them, and here we can see a list of everything else we have installed. And so if you already have a progressive web app installed here, you won't see that extra icon at the top right of the screen we did when we started this demo. So that's something to keep in mind. So let me recap what I just showed. With the new Edge, we're bringing support for cross-platform web applications based on web standards, and they can be discovered and installed from the browser. And they'll be available across all versions of Windows, wherever Edge is available. And they're cross-platform. A preview of this is now available across the Canary and Dev channels on Edge, and support for store-based discovery for PWAs is in the works and will be coming later. The next thing we heard from many developers was that they'd like to use the latest web features in their web views as soon as it's safe to do so. This helps them reduce fragmentation and testing costs, as the web content is often shared and stays up to date with the browser updates. Today, developers have a wide range of choice to write their native applications. As an example, on Windows, you can create a Win32 or a UWP application. At times, developers want to use a simple web view control to show an advertisement. In other cases, developers want to reuse components written for the web within an app. Windows has supported a web view control for a long time. However, the support had some downsides. Just like the browser, the web view support was fragmented across different versions of Windows, increasing your dev and test costs. And then the support across Win32 and UWP apps, even within the same version of the browser, was also inconsistent. And both of these issues caused significant developer pain. To solve these problems, I am happy to share with you that we will be bringing a new WebView control. The new WebView control will always be up to date with the latest browser version. It'll be consistent across all versions of Windows, and it'll be available across Win32 and UWP apps. Yeah! Yeah! While talking to customers, we heard that there are a small number of cases where app compatibility is a priority over staying consistent. For those cases, we will allow the apps to package a specific version of this control with their native apps. This option would also be available across all versions of Windows for both Win32 and UWP apps. We shared with you that we're bringing a new browser, we're bringing support for standards-based PWAs, and we're bringing a new WebView control. So the obvious question on your mind would be, what happens to existing apps? And the answer is simple. They continue to work as is. We are very early in our journey with the new apps. However, we wanted to show and share with you the early previews so that we can get your feedback to improve the product. The last thing we heard from developers that I will be covering today is the fact that developers want to use the same set of developer tools when they're working with web content across any context, be it the browser, PWAs, or web views. Now that we've begun to address some of your top pain points in the new major version of Edge, I wanted to share with you how we're working with Google and other browser vendors in the Chromium project to help build a better web for everyone through open source collaboration. First, I want to share the principles that we aspire to hold ourselves accountable to as we participate in the Chromium project. The first thing we're going to do is we're making this decision for the long term. We expect our engineers to learn and over time become experts in the Chromium project and grow into active and responsible members of the community, including maintaining any contributions that we make. When it comes to the web platform, our default position will be to contribute. While we're focused on delivering a world-class browser with Edge through its differentiated user experiences and connected services, when it comes to the platform, we are seeking a rising tide that floats all boats. We will respect and adhere to the architectural requirements and engineering approaches used in the Chromium project. While we will offer our Windows platform expertise to improve the experience of all Chromium-based browsers on Windows, we will contribute in a way that is consistent with the architectural designs that meets Chromium's cross-platform and cross-device needs. While we will implement our platform features on Chromium, we still believe the evolution of the open web is best served through standards communities, and the web benefits from open debate from a wide variety of perspectives. And while we have these principles at heart, and while we're still early in the Chromium journey, I want to start by sharing how warmly we've been welcomed into the community by Chromium engineers and other browser vendors in this project. And while we're still ramping up in this code base, we've already made some modest but meaningful changes, including landing almost 400 commits into Chromium since our December announcement. Woo! Okay. If you want to start giving feedback to contributions we're making in Chromium, you can take a look at MS Edge Explainers on GitHub. And here you can see what we have in mind for our next contributions to the Chromium project, and you can get more involved with us. Web platform ideas may start here, but they will continue to be incubated further in the right standards bodies. So what are some of the changes we're making, and how are they going to make the web better for you and your customers? I want to talk about 3 things. One of our areas of focus is to help build a more accessible web platform for everyone, including making your standards-based websites more accessible to your users through assistive technology tools that they already use today. Improving accessibility is a multifaceted problem, and we're looking to improve these 5 areas. The current version of Edge is the only browser to get a perfect score on the HTML5 accessibility.com benchmark, and we want to help bring these same improvements to Chromium. High contrast is the most used built-in assistive technology on Windows, and up to 4% of all Windows users use this dialog. Today, if you enable this high particular contrast setting in the Windows Ease of Use dialog and set these settings, you won't see any change in Chromium. So we're making changes to support high contrast by default. After our changes land upstream in Chromium, your web content will just work with system high contrast settings. You don't need to make any changes to your site to get this behavior. And we know web developers care about the look and feel of their sites, so we're also working in the relevant working groups and standards bodies to incubate new proposals that will give you the right set of controls. We've received great support from Chromium engineers on all these accessibility changes, and we expect most of them to land in Edge and other Chromium-based browsers in the coming months. As I mentioned before, we're very interested in bringing our Windows platform expertise to the Chromium codebase to help make the Chromium web platform better for all Chromium-based browsers on Windows. We recognize that making the web better on Windows is great for all of you and our business. Ensuring your users have great and a seamless login experience that's also secure is likely a top priority for all of you. Web authentication is a new web standard that's now broadly supported in most major browsers. By using web authentication in your site, you can use biometrics auth for passwordless and 2-factor authentication scenarios and help your users log in a way that's more secure than traditional passwords. So let's dive into a demo of what this looks like in the new Edge. I'm going to navigate to MSN. And you can see at the top right-hand corner of the browser, I'm logged in with my Azure Active Directory account. But what I want to do here is I want to log in with my MSA. My MSA is already set up with Windows Hello. So if I click Sign In, I have an option of signing in with Windows Hello as the second dialog. So when I click this, we can see that Windows Hello is activated. It recognizes me. I try to log in, and I successfully log in. So that was very easy for me to log in a secure fashion that didn't even require my password. Yay! Okay. I also want to share with you how we're helping improve better hardware integration in Chromium. Smooth scrolling is a very important experience for your users, as it's usually one of the most effective ways to show that your page is in fact responsive and they shouldn't give up on it. When we're starting to investigate how we can bring the most fluid scrolling experiences to Chromium through touchpad, touch, mouse wheel, and scroll bars. And we see that our data shows that roughly every fifth scrolling interaction happens through a scroll bar, so we started looking into scroll bars. We measured the steady state scrolling latency on a Surface Go device through a scroll bar and found Edge HTML is significantly more responsive than Chromium. Fortunately, our Chromium partners are very excited to also improve scrolling. The very first change in this area that we're contributing to Chromium is to help improve responsiveness of scroll bar interactions. So let's take a look at this. If I put two versions of Edge side by side that are running the same website, we can see a beautiful rendition of CSS here with a simple animation on the screen. On the left, I have the current version of Edge which ships with Windows 10. If I go ahead and just play with the scroll bar here, we can see that nothing is impacted on the screen. It reacts the way we'd expect it to. If I go ahead and introduce new noise on the UI thread, we'll see that the animation slows down and becomes more jagged. And if I try to scroll the scroll bar, there are inconsistencies in my ability to scroll. And if I do the exact same thing and the Canary version of Edge that I have installed, of the next version of Edge, without introducing the UI complications, we again have a smooth scrolling experience. And if I introduce noise on the UI thread, and we see the animation slows down here as well, I have a nice responsive scrolling experience that will let the users know that everything is in fact working as it should. So now let's go back to the slides. We get a range of reactions from, so what we see on the screen is actually something that was shown at the Build 2019 keynote, in Satya's keynote specifically. And one of the ways we want to differentiate on Edge is giving users a choice of how they're tracked across the web. We get a range of reactions from customers when talking about how their browsing data is used across the web. Let's take targeted ads, for example. Some find them valuable, some find them creepy, and some just don't care. We're exploring simple tools that let you control who can see what you browse. Here's a feature that we're working on. In the privacy and security settings, I have 3 options. Depending on which option I pick, Edge adjusts how third parties can track me across the web. Unrestricted is a great option if you're fine with how things work today and your browsing experience. Strict is a good option for those who would prefer to block all third-party trackers, even if it means some limitations in what they see and how they use those websites. The balance setting blocks trackers from sites you haven't visited or they don't give you the right level of transparency or control of your data. And regardless of which of these 3 privacy settings you choose, Edge will block malicious trackers. And this is not available in the Canary or Dev builds as of right now, but I just wanted to show you one of the things we're experimenting with to give our Edge users a better experience. Finally, we're beginning to explore with our customers on what's next for the web. While these are only a few of the ideas we're considering, we're very interested in understanding what are your unmet needs on the web. So let's recap what we walked through today. We opened by talking about our new approach, a relentless drive to listen to our customers to deliver on their unmet needs. We then walked through some top themes that we're beginning to address in the next version of Edge, and how these will hopefully help to reduce cost and pain for web and Windows app developers. And last, we talked about our plans to make the web better through open source collaboration and contributions. The contributions we make to the Chromium project will not only benefit all browsers built on Chromium, but even open source projects like Electron and Chromium Embedded Framework that use Chromium as its foundation. And that's that on that.